Hello and welcome to episode number 391 of Smart Podcast Trashy Books. I'm Sarah Wendell, and this is part 4 and the final episode in my series on RWA 1 month later. We've heard from C Chilove and Laurel Cremant and Diana Neal, the officers of CIMRWA, from past RWA president HelenKay Dimon, and from Jessie Edwards, marketing and PR manager for RWA. Today, I'm speaking with Courtney Milan. There is a lot to process, and this is a somewhat emotional interview wherein we talk about what happened, her reactions, and what's next for her. I also want to mention that we talk intermittently, though non-specifically, about the physical manifestations of trauma, so please be aware going into this episode if that's something that's difficult for you to listen to. I invite you to check your podcast feed for all 4 episodes in this series. They should all be there right in a row from January 31st through today. And as a housekeeping note, I will be taking Friday, February 7th off, and I will be back on February 14, Valentine's Day, with Amanda, and I hope that you will tune in then. As always, many thanks to Garlic Knitter for the transcript and to our Patreon community whose support makes transcripts possible. And now, the final episode in RWA 1 month later. Hi there, Courtney. How you doing?
I'm doing ... I was going to say I'm doing fine, but one of the things I've realized recently is that, like, I have this reflexive tendency to say, I'm fine. Like, no matter what is happening, like, the entire world is falling down around me. And, like, it's fine with strangers, you know, because they don't actually want to know about my life or what's going on. But, like, I'd say it to my husband, and then he's like, wait a second, you're not actually fine, are you? And I'm like, oh shit, I'm not.
It sucks when they can call you out on that, doesn't it?
Yeah. The thing is, he usually doesn't call me out on it soon enough. So like, it would be great if I said I'm fine and he said, no, you're not. But usually what happens is I say I'm fine and he like takes me at my word. And then like, 4 hours later, it's like meltdown. So,
yeah. And then he's like, oh, right. And when I asked if you were okay and you said you were fine, that was a not fine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm working on it. So I'm doing ... Yeah.
How are you is a very, very difficult question. And I imagine that the answer is many, many hours long at this point.
Yeah. I guess so. I'm not, so I tend to have like really weird delayed emotional reactions to things. And
yeah.
For the first like 3 or how far in, we're more than 4 weeks into this, aren't we? Damn.
It was 1 month ago on Thursday.
Yeah. So we're now like bumping up against week 5 and emotional reactions have finally started to settle in and they're like wildly all over the place.
That makes sense. What are some of your reactions, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, so there's, I think one of the strongest ones is sadness. I feel like so many people put in so much work trying to move the dial like 2 centimeters. And it lasted for about like 6 months. Like, my God, it's just, I mean, like, and I don't know how much is apparent from people who only were watching it, but like the amount of work that was put in, like the Rita ceremony last year, the amount of labor that was put in by so many people to get a ceremony that was inclusive and celebrated the history of the genre in a way that it's never been celebrated before. Like, so much work by so many people. I feel like I keep saying that. But like, we're talking about people who have probably given up, if we went through and calculated the amount of time we've lost, we're probably talking to people who have donated millions and millions of dollars of labor overall.
How many years were you on the board?
4.
And I asked this of HelenKay, who was on the board for, she says 6, I think it was 6 years. I do not remember numbers well. And I asked her, how many books did serving on the board cost you?
Yeah, a lot. Like,
is that true for you as well?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you can actually just look at my output from when I started on the board and what was it, 2014, November of 2014, like 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018 are like my lowest output years. And then 2019 was like a recovery year for me.
Well, it was at the start, and then it ended kind of poorly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, honestly, 2019, like the emotional impacts for me of serving on the board were pretty intense, and are things that I had just begun to explore, like at the end of 2019, and realizing sort of like some of the things that had happened with me in the interim. Yeah, so I think I was just beginning to sort of like get back on track. And I don't think that's actually been derailed. But, you know, it probably was about like 1.5 full-length books per year for me. And I'm not a fast writer. And I think it's pretty clear if you just go and look at what I published during those years I was on the board.
And this is your job. This is your
Correct.
livelihood. And so volunteering for the board cost you a portion of your livelihood. And I imagine that's true for a lot of board members, especially in years where so much is happening and they were trying to do so much.
I mean, my guess is it probably cost me like easily $500,000.
Holy shit.
You know, and it's fine. Oh shit, I just did it.
No, it's not fine.
See, like, you know, whatever. But you know, let me rephrase that. It was a choice I made, right? On the second term that I served on the board, I was even more aware of the choice that I was making. But I felt like we were doing good things and like it would make a difference to the genre. And so that was a choice I was willing to make. It is what it is.
It's not fine, but you have accepted that was
like I mean, look, the fact that we have a serious structural racism problem in the industry is not fine. The fact that many people decided they were going to throw in what they could in order to try and solve that problem it's not fine that we had to solve the problem, but I felt like it needed to be done.
And you were in a position where you knew exactly what you needed to do to help out.
Not really.
No?
Come on. White supremacy sucks, right?
Yes, it does.
If we could solve it easily, if we knew how to solve it, it would be solved. So we don't know exactly. I mean, like, so I think if you go back and look at the original diversity report, I don't know if it's still accessible on RWA's website because they redid the website and everything got screwed up. But if you go back and look at the version that we put out for the membership, we list a bunch of problems. And the last problem we list is like, we've got this problem in that we've got like a bunch of racist members. And what do we do about that? And it's like there was some things that we had on there that was like, we have very clear solutions, right? Like, you know, in 2005, there was the whole like, you know, one man, one woman issue, right? And it was like, okay, here's a solution.
Oh, yeah.
We can issue an apology and we can like take these steps to like try and make things better. Like there was official board action, so there should be an official board response, right? But stuff like, we've got racist members, what do we do about it? Like I think that the thing we had in that original diversity report could probably be summed up as question mark, question mark, question mark. And that is, I think, the fundamental problem. That the reason why we had all of the other problems was because there were people who explicitly wanted the system we had and never had a solution to it. Never did. Nope. No idea what to do about it. Still not.
And yet, you guys made so much progress.
Yeah.
It is devastating to me as a member who watched it happen and was very much in favor of all the things that you were doing to make it a more inclusive environment. One thing that I've realized in many, many spheres, including the federal government, how fragile progress is.
That's so
fragile. Progress is so fragile. It's built of like balsa wood, like those stupid bridges you had to make to demonstrate physics and how like, you know, one fishing weight can destroy the bridge if you don't build it correctly. It's all balsa wood. And the way we've always done things is like fireproof, ironproof, waterproof.
Yeah.
It's very disheartening.
Well, you know, it is in some ways, but you know, I look at kind of what happened here and I don't fully know what happened here because obviously
I don't think anyone's going to know what happened here.
No.
I'm still trying to Zeb, my dog, does not know what happened here, by the way.
Yeah. I asked Pele and he looked at me and he was like, weird.
Humans, man, they do not make sense.
Yeah. Pele just looked at me right now as I'm talking about him and he's like, yeah, whatever. No, but I think there's one thing that I have learned that I would do differently. I would have fired Allison and Carol way back when we had the chance.
Really?
Yeah. Because the thing is, we clashed a lot, right? And it was always presented to me as, oh, well, you're too radical. Which is like, fuck, all I want is like fucking processes that aren't racist and like not to have whatever, so we clashed a lot and we had like a lot of issues. Like I knew there was we actually don't have the ability as the board to fire Carol. We can only fire the executive director because the executive director handles that. But we knew there were issues. And I don't think we realized how deep-seated they were because it was always presented to us as, oh, well, I'm just trying to do this and cross this I and cross this I, dot this T. I mean, that actually sounds accurate based on what was happening. But like, we have to be very careful and, let's do this. And here's what the lawyer says about this. And, oh, the lawyer says you can't do that. And like all of this stuff, we were so freaking careful on every single step. And there were so many things that we didn't quite get because it was like, oh, well, we have to be careful. And then this comes up and they're not fucking careful on anything. And it becomes quite clear to me at this point that what we're dealing with is white supremacy. And not just white supremacy, but white supremacy where they're totally willing to bend whatever rules when it gets the right result.
So the difference between when you were on the board and the number of times you encountered opposition for policies and changes and rewrites of the rules and the processes of how RWA does its business conflicts greatly with the seeming ease through which this ethics complaint went through.
And every single aspect of it. I mean, there's some things that I can't talk about because they happen in executive session, but I can say for a fact that Allison Kelly gave us counsel about what we were allowed to do in terms of rewriting ethics rules with a pending ethics complaint that is completely contrary to what happened here.
Yikes.
And the number of times that this happened, like there are so many things in here. I look at it and I'm like, what the hell is this bullshit?
That's pretty much an hour and a half of my conversation with HelenKay on Friday. What happened? Well, yeah.
And
it's a hot fucking mess.
And the thing that is most frustrating to me is that they had to have known I would know it was bullshit. Like they were there. They know I understand the procedures. Like Allison has had conversations with me about how to handle complaints in X situation. And I can't talk about details about that, where X is exactly the same sort of complaint that was made here, where Allison was like, I don't think this goes to the ethics committee. She knows she had this conversation with me. What is wrong with her? At the time, I thought that she was sending the complaint to the ethics committee because Tisdale was threatening to sue RWA. Maybe she has this line in her complaint that's like, I will take legal action. And she doesn't really specify who, but whatever. And I thought that, she's thinking to herself, well, Courtney's a big girl. She can handle it. Right. And that pissed me off as it was because, I understand where she's coming from. If that was where she was coming from, like good of the organization and all that. But like, I don't have to be a big girl all the time. So this is now you can see I'm shading into anger here. Like
a little bit.
I don't have to be a big girl all the time. I should deserve to be protected the same way any other member should.
Yes, you should not have to always be a target.
Exactly. And the thing is, like when I was on the board, I was a target constantly.
That was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about, the toll of having so constantly been a target for people's outrage, where things that you didn't even say were attributed to you.
Yes, constantly. And we would have these weeks-long conversation on the board about like, is Courtney too mean? The thing that I notice now that I kind of knew was happening, but it didn't really strike me, is that the people who brought those, it would be like, oh, we heard from a member. It was always Allison and Carol. Oh, Carol heard from a member who's extremely upset about Courtney doing this. And like, they never fucking brought to us any people who were upset about racism. And I know they had conversations with people who were upset about racism.
And anti-Semitism and lack of access and exclusion of culture and exclusion of religion. And
I've
heard a lot of those
things. And it's like one of those things where it's like, you hear it and you're like, that's a little weird,
Mm-hmm.
But it all, and I guess I should have realized earlier what was going on, but I don't know. Like, I knew there were issues, but there's a point where you're hoping that it's actually just sort of subconscious, that,
Yeah.
like that they're not doing it consciously. And at this point, it's very difficult for me, maybe I shouldn't be saying this because then they're going to be like, oh, well, you're defaming me. But like, it's very difficult for me to understand how this could have been anything other than the result of a conscious choice on their part. So much of what has come out since this, I think the biggest thing that gets me is so much of what has come out of people bringing things to Allison and Carol and having it get quashed. And I don't think I realized the extent of it, because I knew like one or two people who were my friends, and I said, oh, you should tell Allison and Carol. And then nothing happened. I thought, oh, maybe they decided they didn't. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, after all of this happened, I go and I check with them. They're like, oh yeah, I told her. And it's like, okay, wait a second. So all of this stuff about Courtney being mean gets brought to the board, but none of the stuff about, complaints about members being racist or about feeling uncomfortable about this, like none of that stuff gets brought up to the board. And the impression the board is given is that everyone fucking hates Courtney all the time. And that nobody really cares about what we do about racism. I mean, that's kind of how I felt. And I realize that I'm exaggerating. It wasn't quite that stark, but it's very close.
I cannot imagine. Well, no, let me walk that back a few centimeters. I do know a small portion of what it's like to be yelled at for doing the things that you always do and doing what you think is the right thing to do. And I do know a small portion of what it's like to have everyone talk about how terrible you are and not be really able to respond in any way. I don't know what it's like to go through what you've gone through. And I want to say on the recording that I am so sorry that you had to endure this bullshit, because it was inhumane.
That's a very interesting thing to say. So like, it's very difficult for me to sort of grapple with what actually happened to me here, if that makes any sense. It's much easier for me.
Absolutely.
It's much easier for me to grapple sort of like the entire RWA structure as being terrible to a large group of people. But I think that at this point, I'm still sort of like backing away emotionally from like, this was a shitty thing to do to me specifically.
Yeah.
Like, it's much easier for me to see it as a structural piece.
Well, that's objective. You can look at structure. You can describe
it. And also,
it.
Then it's not like, oh yeah, here's more proof that people hate you. Woohoo.
Yes, it doesn't feed into the more terrible parts of your brain that, like to talk when you don't want them to.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the effects that like this 4-year-long process of being on the board had on me was getting to the point where I just felt like every word that I said was being scrutinized, and sort of like people were combing through it for like proof that I was terrible. And the impact that this had on my writing was, I can't really describe it, but it's very difficult to actually write books if like literally every word that you write, you're like, fuck, somebody's going to say this. Somebody's going to say that. Somebody's going to say this, right? Like,
yes.
Just like the intense like anxiety about everything that I did was like very pervasive. And like it started getting better sort of like, over the fall. And weirdly enough, getting the ethics complaint in September helped precipitate my understanding exactly how this had sort of like screwed with my mental processes. So
really,
yeah, because, like getting the ethics process I thought first, here's the thing, like I have made this mistake multiple times in my life and I'll probably continue to make it. But, there's sort of this view that's like, okay, trauma is happening to you. And as soon as trauma ends, it's going to be fine and you're going to be great. Right.
Oh, I wish that were true.
So like, during the Kaczynski clerkship, I had this feeling. It's like, okay, as long as I can get through this, everything's going to be great. As soon as the clerkship is done, I'm leaving. I'm out of here and I'm leaving it behind me. And lo and behold, I did not leave it behind me. Right?
Nope. Tends
Carry
to come with you.
Will probably carry on aspects of it for the rest of my life. Right? And so when I was on the board, I was like, okay, when I'm finally off the board, then everything's going to go away and I'll stop worrying about what people are saying about me. And lo and behold, I did not. Right? And so that is an aspect of like this weird sort of like nitpicky, like Courtney is the diversity scapegoat thing that I've had to sort of like process. And the complaint did in fact help me process that, because it made me realize, oh, it's not just being on the board, right? It's this weird sort of like public aspect of like Courtney's words belong to everyone. And so we can nitpick everything that she does. And so I sort of had to get to this spot where I don't want to go into like too much detail about sort of like how I started working through that. But I kind of had to get to the spot where I had to think about who I was writing for and why I was giving so much room to other people in my head and how I could get them out.
I have gone through that exact process, and it is so hard to reconnect yourself with the community that welcomes what you have to say when the community that doesn't welcome what you have to say is so fucking loud.
Yeah.
It is very hard. I do want to ask if I have a book recommendation for you that might help.
Okay.
It's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Okay.
It is about the physical manifestations of trauma, and that you don't really ever put it down, but you can process it, and it shows up in your physical body and in your mental body in a lot of different ways, but it is fundamentally an absolutely mind-blowing book.
I think that is extremely true. I have not read the book. I am literally going on Amazon right now, like clicking like buy on the Kindle edition, because, this was one of my sort of like 2018, 2019 discoveries, that there were ways that physically the Kaczynski clerkship had affected me that I had not undone. And I don't think I can undo, but that I hadn't grappled with and didn't realize were like in play. So
yeah. And you have to sort of make room for the ways that your body handles its past trauma. And for me, I've had to sort of say, oh, okay, well, the reason you react this way is because of this thing. And you're probably always going to react that way. So how can we make this reaction more bearable next time? Yeah. One of the things that I really admired about the way you handled all of this, and I'm sorry, that was dangerously close to a compliment. I apologize. Is, as I know you do not like those, is that you kept reiterating that you have feet of clay, that you don't want to be this icon, that you don't want to be the negative or the positive diversity target spokesperson, because you're really pushing back against this idea that is so pervasive, that the people who are in the public eye trying to get something done have to be perfect in every way, especially if they're women, especially if they're marginalized, especially if they come from a cultural minority. All of these things stack up to, you have to be perfect. You must make every move perfect. And you've been very, very outspoken about saying, no, do not apply that to me. I fuck up too. I have feet of clay.
I do. I completely fuck up all the time. I mean, from my perspective, part of it is just like the hating compliments thing. Like, for me, I guess this goes back into what I was just saying, that I feel like everything gets scrutinized. I don't want to be held to this bar of perfection, right? We all suck in some ways. And the only thing that we can do is try to suck less from day to day. Like if somebody comes to me and they're like, Courtney, you actually suck. I probably do suck. And I think one of the things that, that I have to deal with in terms of sucking is dealing with a very large number of people telling me that I suck and having this fundamental thought that I do suck. And so I should listen to them, and recognizing that, in fact, it is not conceivable for me to listen to like 20,000 people telling me I suck all at once.
Nope.
So it's this weird thing where it's like, I have to give myself permission to not, to unsuck myself at a rate that makes sense and allows me to process it.
And also to give you the right to decide, well, I get to decide where I suck. I get to decide what I am working on, what actually are my flaws that I consider mine, that I want to fix. Because the things that someone else doesn't like about me, I mean, okay, so I'm cilantro. You think I taste like soap. That's fine. I am still cilantro, and I'm putting lots of it in my salsa because it's delicious.
Right. It is delicious. No, but I think I am actually a very strong flavor. Like I totally get people not liking me, like 100%. It has happened basically all of my life since I learned to speak up, which is not 100% of my life.
I know all the words to this song. Yes.
Yeah. Like I'm an intensely shy person around people I don't know. But once I have like a little bit of comfort, then I'm like, 6 out of 7 kids. And so I know that like no one will hear me unless I'm extremely loud. Like, I think that explains like 98% of like what you see about me. It's like, I'm 6 out of 7 kids. Nobody would listen to me ever if I didn't have strong reasons backed up by receipts said extremely loudly.
You're also 6 out of 7 siblings who are extremely intelligent and extraordinary in their own ways.
Yeah, that is also true.
Yeah. I mean, one of your siblings is a MacArthur Grant recipient, right? Like arguing with a literal genius is not easy.
Yeah, well, she's actually one of the easier ones to get along with.
That's why she got the grant.
Yeah.
She learned.
Yeah, well, I should say easier for me. Does not necessarily mean easier for others. Yeah, we tend to be on the same, she and I tend to be on the same sort of like general wavelength. And so she'll ask me questions. She's like, I don't know why I'm asking you. You're just going to tell me what I want to do. And I was like, that's why you're asking me.
Well, yeah.
I have some very strong-willed people in my family. So it's like, imagine like a family of 7 people who are very different from Courtney, but have many of the same characteristics of like, nitpickiness and like whatever. Yeah. And you get Courtney.
There was a time when all this was happening, as you know, when you browse something and your Google remembers what you're looking at, it serves you up similar things. And there would be times when I would open the browser on my phone and it would just be news article after news article of you. Oh. I'd be like, oh, there's Courtney's face. There's more Courtney. There's wow. Oh, okay. And now it's on this site and now it's on this site. What was your reaction to that? And what was your family's reaction to that? Were they like, holy shit, who do we need to kick ass here?
So, my reaction, like I said, I have delayed emotional reactions to things. And my reaction was basically this. I'm so glad I got good professional photos done.
It is a great photo. That is not wrong.
Like, oh my God, I'm so glad that I have like it's like a decent picture.
It's a great
I'm
picture.
Cool with it.
You look so friendly and
everywhere.
Yeah, you look great.
Everywhere. So that was basically my reaction. Like if I have to look at my own face, like, okay, it's a decent version of my face. I'm taking it. I realize that's probably not like the intellectual response you're looking for.
No, that is the exact response I would have too. It is a great picture. It's actually in my notes. Make sure to tell Courtney it's a great picture.
Yeah. So I basically like 98% of my reaction was like, I don't want to read this. Like, I didn't want to read about it. So I avoided.
Don't blame you.
The majority of stuff. In terms of my family's reaction, we had a New Year's. My family gets together every New Year's, like all of us, like 7 kids, all the grandkids. It's a lot of people in one place. And I told them about it from the beginning, and they were just like, okay, whatever. Like there wasn't really a sense of like, we need to go kick ass for you. It was just like, okay, well, you've probably already kicked their ass, it looks like, so we'll just play games. We want to play a game with us. So, yeah.
Which is a good response to have. Like, yeah. Let's go play checkers.
Like the thing is, if I had asked them for help, they would have been like there, but I mostly just wanted to be distracted. And I want it to be my life. Like, here I am with my family, and we've got shit to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we had Avalon to play. Also, just for the record, they asked me how I was doing, and I said, I'm fine. So
one of the questions that I've had from people in my community, people on my podcast Patreon are, what can readers do? What do we do to move this community forward? And I don't have an easy answer for that. And I was wondering if that's a question you've also received.
I have. I've received this question often, and I don't have an easy answer either, because it's not an easy thing.
No, sure isn't.
It is an extremely shitty thing, in fact. And if we had easy answers to any of this, we would know what was going on. And I think that to the extent that there is an answer, and I'm not sure that there is one, I think the answer is like work to be less racist and to reduce the amount of racism in your community. That's literally the only thing. Like, because what we're butting up against here is this hard problem that I mentioned earlier that was in like the last part of the diversity report. Like, bunches of people are racist. What do we do about it? Like, I don't know. Like, one of the things that I think this has really underscored for me is that you cannot actually make someone less racist. And this is one of those things, like, I am such a process person in so many ways. It's like, oh, don't like this? Here's a process for you. I'm going to fix it with a process. And like, there is no process.
There's no manual.
And it's not just that there's no manual. There is a manual, but you can hand it to people and they're like, okay, I read it. I hate it.
Yep.
Nothing you can do about somebody who determinedly does not want to change, right? Nothing. There is no process. And so like, I think your choices at this point are, you know, what do you do with RWA? Question mark. I think there are a lot of people in RWA who mean well. I think there are a lot of people in RWA who are committed to diversity. And I think there are a lot of people in RWA who have not examined what it means to be in an anti-racist community and what it means to be in one that is supporting white supremacy. Mm-hmm. And the group of people that exists there is vastly overlapping. So I think one of the issues with RWA is this. I think a lot of people of color are going to leave because it's just not a safe place to be. Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of white people, not all white people, I think a lot of white people, including some very well-meaning white people, are going to see all the people of color leaving and they're going to say, well, we have to prove that this place is safe. So I'm going to stay here and make it better. And I'm going to tell you that what you are doing at this point is reinforcing white supremacy when that happens. And you don't want to hear that. And it's going to make you mad to hear that a group of all white people staying in RWA and continuing to give money to an organization that is white by design at this point, you know, like they specifically did a thing knowing the effect that this would have on the community of color. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
I think you're going to have to figure out how to get out of RWA if RWA can't get itself out of this nosedive. And I don't think it can. And I don't think anyone wants to hear that their multicultural chapter that they worked so hard to diversify, if all the people of color leave because they won't say in RWA Nationals that you are propping up white supremacy to stay, but you are. So that's my only hard thing that I'm going to say. That if RWA doesn't figure out how to get rid of white supremacy, it's a white supremacist organization. And right now, it doesn't look like they're even trying.
No. As I said in my conversation with HelenKay, she pointed out you have people who are from the multicultural and inclusive chapter that is founded on activism and advocacy. They are working to save RWA. They are trying to fix it. They are trying to advocate for saving what's left, if anything is left, because one of the things that's damaged is the immeasurable advocacy element. You can't say how much an organization has in terms of influence. You can't measure that, but you know that it has to have been lost in a substantial portion after this.
Well, more importantly, you know, RWA had a chance to advocate for major publishers about what they were going to do to diversify their industry.
Yep.
And RWA had taken steps, and I don't think they were sufficient, but they were steps, right? RWA had taken steps to push publishers to think about things. And now they have absolutely like no ground to stand on. What publisher is going to say, oh yes, I will listen to you about diversity? Like, come on.
Is there anything you would like to happen next or soon? Is there anything that you would like to see?
I would like to not have to be in charge of doing it.
Well, okay.
That's like, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I spent 4 years trying to figure out what the answers were. I obviously didn't do a very good job of it. It's time to leave Courtney alone and let somebody else have a whack at it.
Well, I would disagree that you didn't do a good job of it, because as I said when I initially wrote about this, it wouldn't hurt so much if there hadn't been real progress, if there hadn't been changes that had been made, if it hadn't made forward momentum, it wouldn't hurt so much to see it lost. And I don't think, I do not want you to feel like you are in charge of anything. One of the questions that Diana Neal from CIMRWA asked rhetorically was, what do I need to see to feel comfortable with RWA? What do I need to see RWA do to make it feel like progress has been made again in the right direction? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think there is an answer to that, but I'm not sure what it is, you know? So here's the thing. One of the things RWA is going to have to do is reach out to all the many groups of people who were wronged by this. And there's so many in so many ways. And to take meaningful measures to undo the harm that they've done. And at this point, like, you know, we're sorry isn't going to cut it. Like, there needs to be more than just an apology. And they haven't even gotten to the apology stage yet. Like, the most we've gotten is like, we're sorry that we've lost your trust. And it's like this is such a meaningless statement. You could talk about why you've lost our trust and what you're going to do to prevent it from ever happening again. But like, you know, like, I think one of the big problems RWA faces right now is that like, there's a pretty hefty bar that you have to cross to become RWA president. And it was already difficult in regular times finding somebody who met that bar, who was willing to devote like how much of their life to running this stupid ship, which is a terrible job, for the, you know, the overwhelming pay of $0.
Yep. As HelenKay and I were saying, the people who were uncomfortable before are now very comfortable.
And they're very comfortable. They're delightedly comfortable.
Oh, yeah. They got rid of all those problems.
Yep.
Ugh. What is next for you?
I'm going to Korea to watch Yuzuru Hanyu skate in the 4 continents.
Okay, my next question is, and what's up with ice skating? So I'm glad that you have hit that question too. You're going to Korea to see ice skating?
I am. I wasn't going to go. But then Yuzuru Hanyu announced that he was going to 4 continents in Korea, which he hasn't gone in several years. This was like on the 22nd or the 21st of December. And I was like, well, I absolutely should not go. But as long as I really buckle down and concentrate for the next month, I can really get everything in place.
Oh,
and it'll be perfect.
Well, shit.
So I bought like plane tickets and whatever. And I was like, I'm going to make this happen. Whatever. And then like 2 days later, this whole thing with RWA blew up in my face. And I was like, really, universe, really? But it's okay. I'm going to go see Yuzuru Hanyu skate, and he's going to make it all better.
It really seems like from the way you've talked about skating that it has become a place of great solace and happiness for you.
You know, it is and it isn't. Because look, skating is exactly like the rest of the world in that it's racist, but there's more men in it. So there's also more sexual harassment. I mean, there's like so much fat shaming. There's like, I have to ignore, and I don't. I do a very bad job of ignoring things that piss me off. Like, I know everyone has feet of clay, and I'm sure this includes Yuzuru Hanyu. You know, he's just delightful. And I hope he never really, truly, deeply disappoints me. We'll see.
And there's always Yuri.
Yeah, you know. Yeah.
There's always Yuri on Ice. Can always rewatch.
Yeah, I have rewatched Yuri on Ice a great number of times.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
While you are not fine unilaterally across the board.
Yes.
At the moment, are you okay?
Yes. I suppose I am. I mean, I think I am. I think it is teaching me coping skills.
Oh, just a bit.
Yeah. And I think it has been, you know, so the interesting thing is, like, this happened, and then like this whole thing with American Dirt came up, you know, starting in the last handful of weeks as the momentum grows towards the juggernaut of, you know, Oprah Winfrey, book club pick, et cetera, et cetera. And just about every Latina that I follow is like, what the hell are you doing? This is so offensive. And then, of course, there's like this backlash to it that's like, how dare you try and censor people? And I found this entire discussion to be, and I hate using this word, but I really think it's accurate, extremely triggering for me.
I think that is entirely the right word.
Like, it's a really intensely traumatic discussion for me.
Yeah.
Not just because this book fucking sucks and this person got $1 million, but like I just really intensely identify with the people who are criticizing the book and getting like endless waves of shit for it from people who call them, like, saying that they're censoring and, you know, purity culture and like all this stuff. I just like, yeah. And I'm so not, I don't think I've said that much about it online, but like, it's like everything about it. It's just misery. But it's very interesting because it's easier for me to process what's going on there than it is sort of like what's going on with me. So it's been kind of like this indirect route into my own feelings. But yeah.
Landing right on a bruise. An active one. Yeah. It's all part of the same structural pattern.
It's really amazing to me how easy it is for people to cancel a woman of color for saying like one thing that's like kind of mean.
Yeah.
Hi, Silver.
Oh my gosh, cat and dog on the podcast? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you know, cats have a lot to say about human bullshit. Mine does, at least.
My cat is like, feed me. Oh, you seem very sad. What you need is a cat to climb in your lap, lightly claw your face, and remind you that my food bowl is not empty, but it's half full now, and you should refill it.
Oh yeah, when Wilbur can see the bottom of this food bowl, it is intolerable.
Totally intolerable.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about or say? Open floor.
That's like really open-ended.
Yeah, and I usually don't ask questions like that, but I want to make sure that there isn't something that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask about.
You know, okay, actually, so now that you say that, I want to clear up something about something that we talked about earlier, because it's just occurred to me. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. When people asked what they could do as readers, I just want to sort of spell out one of the dynamics that happens here. And the discussion about American Dirt brought it up too. So I want to start off by saying, like, I'm going to be using an analogy, and I'm not trying to say that you should treat your waitstaff badly, because I very much believe the opposite. My father-in-law is one of those people who goes to a restaurant, and he loves going to restaurants because he can tell waiters his jokes. And they're not off color, but they're just very bad, right? They're not funny. And he loves going to restaurants because nobody laughs at his jokes. But when he goes to a restaurant, he can tell his joke to the waitress and she's going to laugh.
Because she's being paid to be there.
She's being paid to be there, right?
Yeah.
And it is her job to see to his comfort. Now, in general, like, people should not be assholes to waitstaff. But when they are, waitstaff are expected to be very polite in response. And I just want to point out that one of the things I keep seeing people say, or that people like try and tell me, is like, Courtney, you weren't polite enough. And the thing is, like, you know, you can tell people about tone policing and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, but you would be communicating with people more effectively if you were always polite. And the thing I want to point out about this dynamic, I want you to stop doing this shit, right? If you are doing this shit, if you're a person asking what you can do, I want you to stop tone policing. And the reason I want you to do that is because it's not about whether people are polite or not. It's because the expectation you're reinforcing is that people of color are waitstaff, and it is our job to make you comfortable. It is not our job to make you comfortable. And it is, in fact, white supremacy that makes you think it is our job to make you comfortable. The truth of the matter is, we're in an uncomfortable situation, and your racism makes us uncomfortable. And when we make you uncomfortable by pointing it out, all we're doing is redistributing the load to where it belongs. So stop telling people that you have to make people comfortable in order for them to address their racism. That is, in fact, itself an act of racism that reinforces white supremacy and treats people of color like waitstaff who are forced to do your bidding. Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of this 4-episode series, RWA 1 month later. You can find all 4 episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to Courtney Milan for her time and for her continued advocacy. She did not mention it, but I am going to. Her latest book is Mrs. Martin's Incomparable Adventure. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can find me at sbjpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you if you have thoughts or reactions to this series. And I want to thank our podcast Patreon community, whose support makes transcripts of this series and of every episode possible. If you would like to have a look at the Patreon, it is patreon.com/smartpitches. Thank you again for listening. I know this is a lot of audio, but I hope that this series was helpful and thought-provoking and interesting for those of us who have been following RWA intently for the last month or so. As I mentioned in the intro, I will be taking Friday, February 7th off, and I will be back on February 14th on Valentine's Day with Amanda. We will be back on our regularly weekly schedule after that. Thank you again for listening. Have a wonderful week. Smart Podcast Trashy Books is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more outstanding podcasts to listen to at frolic.media/podcasts.